This morning, fans and co-stars are mourning the shocking death of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, the actor best known as Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner, the iconic actor who played Theo on The Cosby Show, has passed away. And it's not just heartbreaking, it's weird, because right before he passed, he left this message. And it didn't sound like a simple goodbye. It felt more like a warning. Now that he's no longer here, people are starting to really question everything. Like, why didn't anyone take what he said seriously? Why does it always feel like whenever someone tries to speak out or expose something, they end up gone? Was this just a random accident? Or is there more to the story that's being brushed under the rug? Malcolm's sudden death just doesn't seem to add up, and it's left his fans completely shaken. He was just 54, on a trip with his family in Costa Rica when he apparently drowned. According to what officials are saying, he got caught in some strong currents at Clay's Beach in Limon.
Costa Rican officials say Warner drowned Sunday afternoon in the province of Limon.
At first, reports said some people on the beach tried to save him. But by the time emergency responders from Costa Rica's Red Cross got there, he didn't have a pulse. He was taken to the morgue, and that was it.
54-year-old was swept away by the sea's current before bystanders were able to pull him out of the water, but he had no vital signs.
But here's the thing. A lot of people aren't buying that it was just some tragic accident. The timing, the whole situation, and especially that message he posted a few days before everything happened. It's got people seriously uneasy. Like he wasn't just on some chill vacation. He was trying to say something, maybe even expose something. And now, he's gone, just like that. Just 2 days before his passing, Malcolm-Jamal Warner released what would be the final episode of his podcast, Not All Hood. Looking back now, many are calling it his hidden goodbye. But it wasn't your average podcast episode. It was deep, raw, and filled with emotion. He opened up in a way that felt almost like he knew something was coming.
And, you know, life is out here lifing, right? For me and for everybody else. But just wanted to remind you, as I remind myself, that no matter what's going on, there's always a reason to smile.
In that episode, he talked about a recent moment that really shook him. He had a conversation with spoken word artist Tamika Georgia Me Harper. When he told her about the title of his podcast, she immediately responded, "Ain't nothing wrong with the hood." Warner started thinking about how the media often paints the black community in one way, focusing on the hood as if that's all there is. He wasn't rejecting his roots at all. In fact, he was doing the opposite. He was pointing out how society has twisted, misunderstood, and exploited those roots. To him, the very culture that gets dismissed and overlooked is the same one that shaped America. That's not just a cultural opinion. It's a truth that speaks to how black culture has been borrowed, erased, and misrepresented, especially in Hollywood. But that wasn't all he talked about. He also opened up about how his views had changed over the years, especially when it came to terms like black excellence. He admitted he used to side-eye the phrase, thinking it was all about chasing fame and wealth. But then he learned about how black soldiers had been left out of the historical records at Arlington National Cemetery. That moment shifted everything for him. To him, simply surviving, making it through, was black excellence. Not the money, not the spotlight, but endurance itself. He spoke from the heart, saying the black community isn't one-dimensional. He wanted to create a space where all of that could be seen and heard. One line from that episode still lingers, just survival. It hit hard when he said it, and now knowing what happened just hours later, it cuts even deeper.
Effect that it had on black people worldwide can never be taken.
It's almost as if he sensed something, like he knew time was running out and wanted his last words to be a message that honored the resilience, the pain, and the strength of his community. To a whole generation, he'll always be remembered as Theo Huxtable, the warm, funny, lovable son on The Cosby Show. But through that last episode, we saw another side of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, one that was vulnerable, thoughtful, and incredibly powerful. For so many people, Malcolm-Jamal Warner wasn't just another actor on TV, he felt like family. His role as Theo, the teenage son on The Cosby Show, made him a regular presence in millions of homes. Watching him grow up on screen, dealing with things like dyslexia, leaning on the steady guidance of his parents, made him feel real, someone people could relate to. That image of the kind, calm, thoughtful young man followed him for years. But that brings up a deeper question. Who was Malcolm-Jamal Warner when the cameras weren't rolling? When you look past the surface, you won't find some long list of scandals or headline-making drama. What you'll see is someone who quietly carried a lot, personal losses, emotional weight, and the complicated legacy of a show that's no longer remembered the same way it once was. Through it all, he stayed grounded. Instead of spiraling the way many child stars do, he chose a different path, one rooted in growth, honesty, and resilience. He talked openly about heartbreak, about how the Cosby fallout affected him, and about the quiet strength it took to keep moving forward. One of the toughest moments in his career didn't come from something he did. It came from being connected to someone else. The Bill Cosby scandal put him in a deeply uncomfortable place, and the way he handled it said a lot about who he was. To understand his reaction, you have to know how close they were. Cosby didn't just cast Warner, he mentored him. He handpicked him at 13 years old, after a national search, to play Theo. On set, Cosby was more than just a co-star. He was someone Warner looked up to. He often shared how Cosby's humility, despite his fame, taught him how to stay grounded. Cosby also gave him advice that stuck. Avoid using slang that would date the show. Years later, Warner said that tip paid off. Watching the show with his daughter, he realized it still held up. Their connection was personal, part mentorship, part father figure, and that made everything that happened later even more painful. When over 50 women came forward accusing Cosby of SA, Warner was thrust into a situation he never asked for. And he didn't respond with a press release or a PR-friendly statement. He spoke honestly and with emotion. In a 2015 interview, he said, "He's one of my mentors. Just as it's painful to hear any woman talk about SA, whether true or not, it's just as painful to watch my friend and mentor go through this."
Because when you watch someone who you know and love, go through what he's going through, it's difficult not to, not to feel something, have some kind of emotional response to, what this person is going through.
That one quote showed just how torn he was. He was heartbroken for the victims, and also heartbroken over what had become of someone he once admired. He didn't excuse Cosby's actions, but he also didn't completely turn away from him. As Warner put it, "I can't defend him, but I won't throw him under the bus either." He also called out the media for the way the story was handled, describing the coverage as a circus and reminding people that not every allegation was the same.
Honestly, my biggest feeling is I feel sad for, just the way this whole, just the way the whole story has come about, and when you've done so much wonderful, so many wonderful things for so much of your career, and after having had such a long path and long journey, you have something like this that you've got to contend with.
Malcolm-Jamal Warner wasn't trying to brush anything under the rug or defend what couldn't be defended, and you could tell how much it weighed on him. The entire situation was emotionally exhausting. But what hit him hardest during the Cosby fallout wasn't just the accusations. It was watching the legacy of the Cosby Show crumble. That show had been so much more than a job to him. It was a cultural landmark, something that gave the world a different lens through which to see black families not as stereotypes, but as complex, loving, everyday people. He once said, "We've always had the Cosby Show to hold up against that, and the fact that we no longer have that, that's what saddens me the most. In a few generations, the Huxtables will just be a fairy tale." That loss wasn't just symbolic for Warner, it was personal and financial. Seeing the show yanked from syndication hurt in every way. He was open about the double standard, too, pointing out that despite serious allegations, films by directors like Woody Allen and Roman Polanski were still being aired, while The Cosby Show was wiped off the map. "It's literally taking money out of my pocket," he said. Over time, though, his feelings began to shift. At first, he agreed the scandal had tainted everything, but then a conversation with Keshia Knight Pulliam, who played Rudy, helped him see things in a new light. She reminded him of the real-world impact the show had. It inspired generations, especially young black viewers, to see themselves differently, to aim higher, dream bigger, and even pursue college. "Her saying that really shifted my perspective," he later admitted. That moment helped him stop focusing on what was taken away and start thinking about what had already been given. Instead of letting the scandal erase the show's legacy, he began to argue that its influence could still stand on its own. It was a clear sign of growth, a turning point that showed Warner wasn't just stuck in grief, but willing to reflect and move forward. He started to separate the work from the man, acknowledging the damage while still honoring the art. And in doing so, he showed a deeply human kind of resilience, one that doesn't pretend everything's okay, but tries to make peace with it anyway. What's also worth noting is how rare Warner's journey has been. In an industry where many child stars fall into chaos, he quietly chose a different path. No scandals, no public meltdowns, just consistent, thoughtful work. That kind of stability didn't happen by accident. It came from discipline, intention, and a clear sense of who he wanted to be. After The Cosby Show, he worked hard to step out of Theo's shadow. There was a time he didn't even like being called that name anymore, not because he hated the character, but because he needed people to see that he was more than just a sitcom kid. And he proved it.
92.
This show has given me a wonderful opportunity to be able to grow and to be able to kind of show what I can do.
Warner explored so many creative avenues. He directed TV episodes for shows like Kenan and Kel and built a solid reputation as both a musician and spoken word artist. He even won a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Performance and got a nomination for Best Spoken Word Poetry Album. As an actor, he never stayed in one box. He played all kinds of comedic roles in Malcolm and Eddie, serious roles in The Resident, Suits, and Major Crimes. He even took on a dramatic part in American Crime Story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, which earned widespread critical praise. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's career didn't just happen by chance. The wide range of work he's done over the years, from acting and music to directing and spoken word, shows how intentional he's been about growing and evolving as an artist. What makes his story even more powerful is what's missing. While a lot of actors who grew up in the spotlight ended up tangled in legal trouble, addiction, or messy public drama, Warner managed to avoid all that. He gives a lot of credit to his mom, Pamela, who not only managed his career, but also kept him grounded with a strong sense of discipline from the beginning. Even back in the 80s, he was using his platform for good. In 1988, he published a book called Theo and Me, Growing Up Okay. It wasn't about chasing fame. It was filled with advice for young people about making smart choices, steering clear of drugs, and staying on the right path. He was spreading positive messages long before it became the norm. The fact that he's avoided scandal all these years says a lot. Warner didn't just survive child stardom. He learned from what he saw happening around him and made conscious decisions to take a different path. His creative choices reflect that too. While his earlier work leaned on his TV fame, over time his projects started to go deeper, tackling serious social issues. His spoken word album, Hiding in Plain View, earned a Grammy nomination, and his 2017 short film You Can't Hear Me confronted heavy topics like mass incarceration, racism, and deportation. These weren't surface-level pieces. They came from a place of purpose and personal conviction. That foundation was set early on by his father, who introduced him to powerful black thinkers and artists like Langston Hughes when he was just a kid. His evolution from a beloved child actor to a thoughtful, socially aware artist didn't happen by accident. It was the result of talent, intention, and a willingness to grow on his own terms, no matter what the industry expected from him. But it wasn't just professional challenges that shaped him. Some of the most defining moments in Warner's life happened far from the spotlight. Private heartbreaks left quiet but lasting marks, especially when it came to how he viewed love, fame, and emotional privacy. One of the most painful moments came in his early adult years, with the loss of someone very close to him, Michelle Thomas. She played Justine, Theo's love interest on The Cosby Show, and was also his girlfriend off-screen for a time. Even after their relationship ended in 1994, the bond between them remained strong. In 1997, Michelle was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of stomach cancer. Just a year later, in December 1998, she passed away at only 30. Warner was reportedly there with her in her final moments. Losing someone so young, someone who shared both the screen and a deeply personal connection with him, was a devastating experience.
And I've got my head on straight, my soul and dignity is intact. Like, I've had a really wonderful journey.
But he didn't speak about it publicly or use it for attention. He grieved privately with quiet strength. Years later, Malcolm-Jamal Warner found himself in a relationship that played out much differently than any he'd had before this time, with the public watching every move. From 2011 to 2013, he was romantically involved with actress Regina King. They had known each other since their teen years in the spotlight during the 80s and eventually moved in together. But when things ended in 2013, it wasn't quiet or private. It made headlines fast. According to tabloid reports, Warner had abruptly asked King and her son to leave the home they shared. Things escalated when, in a 2015 interview, King revealed that the breakup happened on Valentine's Day. She shared that he sent her flowers afterward with a note that said, "I still love you." Her response? She said she threw the flowers away. That heartbreak, public, painful, and scrutinized, was a stark contrast to the loss Warner experienced with Michelle Thomas years before. That earlier grief had been quiet, intimate, and deeply personal. If Michelle's passing had taught him the value of real connection, his breakup with Regina seemed to teach him how damaging it could be when something so personal becomes public property. After that, Warner drew a clear line. He became much more guarded about his love life, rarely speaking about it in interviews or posting anything remotely personal online. Those two experiences seemed to leave him with lasting lessons, that love is fragile, and it can either shape you quietly or break you loudly. One loss deepened his emotional core, the other pushed him toward protecting his peace. And now, fans are starting to piece things together. Looking back, it's hard to ignore a pattern. It seems like every time a black public figure starts to peel back the curtain, to speak boldly, to push for real change, their voice is silenced. Warner, like so many before him, was stepping into something new. He wasn't just looking back, he was imagining a future that didn't have to follow Hollywood's script. His podcast became a space for exactly that. A place to talk about black identity honestly, without needing to soften the truth for mainstream comfort. It may not have reached millions, but what he was doing mattered. Warner had been elevated early on as a child star, but even as he continued to work and grow as a director, musician, and advocate, he was never quite embraced by the system. He stayed away from the fame-hungry circles. He focused on his craft. He spoke his truth, and yet, when he passed, the silence was deafening. There were no sweeping tributes, no network specials, no wide-scale recognition from the industry that once put him on a pedestal. Just a few brief mentions in the news, and then silence. But when people revisited Warner's final podcast, something changed. The episode felt less like a goodbye and more like a trail of clues. He talked about cultural erasure, about how black soldiers fought for freedoms they never fully received, about how neighborhoods that are often vilified are actually the root of so much of America's cultural greatness. He wasn't just preaching survival, he was redefining success. And now he's gone. Right when his voice was gaining traction, it was taken away. It doesn't feel random anymore. It fits into a growing list of voices we've lost at their peak. When people pass away unexpectedly, there's often more to the story than what meets the eye. And that's exactly why Malcolm-Jamal's death just doesn't seem to add up. You see, Chadwick Boseman passed away after challenging history through his roles. Nipsey Hussle was gunned down after promoting self-ownership and rebuilding communities. Dave Chappelle nearly erased for walking away from a toxic system and daring to speak freely. And now, Malcolm-Jamal Warner finally speaking without filters, only to be silenced. In one podcast moment, he said, "I had this show and felt like people were trying to control me. I was freaked out. I don't know, I just had to get out of there. I walked away from McDonald's. It's all gone. I'm scared." We're not saying it was a conspiracy, but it doesn't feel like a coincidence either. There's a pattern. Whenever someone stops playing the part and starts talking about what doesn't sell, struggle, truth, resilience, something happens. And it often ends with heartbreak. Warner deserved more than a quiet headline, more than a brief mention on gossip blogs. He was a man with something real to say, something that questioned what we've all been conditioned to accept. And now, all we have left is that message, the one he tried to share before it was too late. Maybe now it's time to listen before another voice disappears.